The recent Little Nightmares showcase gave us a lot to look forward to. A plethora of exciting announcements across all forms of media for us to sink deeper into. Several links, ties, throwbacks and connections that had theorists red-stringing our walls like we're expecting MatPat to burst in at any second to review our commitment to the cause. And while this video, unlike my previous theory videos, is very non-specific in its direction, I do think that we've found some very interesting hints hidden within the passing glimpses we got that I would consider noteworthy. And I'd like to share them with you, little ones. Now, these are in no particular order, and there may be some links I've missed, so feel free to let me know about any of those in the comment section below. But just so you know, these points are not chronological. But, with timelines in mind, there may be a subtle detail embedded in this carnival environment which hints at when these events take place. If we think back to the Sounds of Nightmares, episode 4, 2 of a Kind, Noon mentions that she can see the reflections of fairy lights shining in puddles left by the rain which had cleared before she arrived. Now, while we all know that the weather can change on a dime, we can use this line to temper our expectations somewhat. If it's currently raining as we traverse the funfair, then it's unlikely we will get to see Noon in the game, as she explicitly states that she arrived after the rain had stopped. That's not to say that we won't get to see Noon and her performing compatriots as we progress through the chapter, or that the weather is any indicator of the timeline at all, given that there could be years between the events in the game and in those of the Sounds of Nightmares. But I thought it was curious how they made a point of including this detail in a chapter that is directly tied to the game. And speaking of details, we happen across a multitude of them scattered throughout this showcase, a repeating factor of which also ties into episode 4 of the audio fiction series, as we get to see several direct and indirect references to the Ventriloquist and his dummy, also known as the man in the purple suit. This hideous hive mind can be spotted slinking around in the distance, with multiple references to his presence shown in signs, suits, and silhouettes hung up and down the carnival. This guy is quite clearly one of the more influential enemies we encounter throughout the series, and his powers may be a nod to, or even directly tied to, those which the principal is implied to have in artworks depicted in the Little Nightmares 2 art book. The similarities to the bullies and the ventriloquist's curious role seeming to give him a network of influence within his domain. The Sounds of Nightmares description alluding to the fact that without his puppet, he's far less threatening than his pint-sized counterpart. However, whether or not this creature is physically imposing, it seems he may be one of the higher-ranking residents that we've come across so far. Now, why do I say this? Well, there are several reasons. But the most prominent of those is this. We have seen this map before, or at least part of it. However, this time we have something rather telling, which indicates to us the importance of this particular character. As you can see, the map is pinned and strung with interlinked points of interest. So let's consider what these points might highlight. Usually, points like these are used to track a target's movements, sightings, checkpoints, significant events, etc. This method may be implemented as a means to predict a destination based on movement patterns or to triangulate coordinates for a particular area of interest. Which means that the man in the purple suit is likely working in close communication to somebody who is able to track a certain somebody over long distances. So who could he be tracking? Honestly, anyone. At this point, nothing is clear. One thing we can be sure of though, is that this map recognises links between 5 locations within the nowhere, one of which is sitting smack bang in the middle of the ocean, which carries some exciting implications of its own. The obvious one being that the target they're tracking has already visited the mall and left. Or that more than one target has been sighted aboard the insatiable vessel, and there are 2 extra chapters to explore in the deluxe version of the game. So, moving on to some minor but no less interesting points that I thought were worthy of note. I expect that, as with the previous games in this series, there will be a list of achievements and collectible items throughout our adventure, some less obvious than others. The first of which are these big red balloons that we can see dotted around the carnival. And though we don't see Law actually doing this in any of the footage shown, putting large red balloons in a video game where you control a child with a crossbow is just begging to be shot at. It could also be a cheeky and rather fitting reference to Pennywise the Clown, from Stephen King's iconic horror novel turned movies, It. After all, this wouldn't be the first parallel we've found hidden within the games. Perhaps popping them all might result in an achievement. Eh? Something else a little more subtle but no less notable is the inclusion of these fortune tellers. Now, a couple of these pop up throughout the showcase, but there's something akin to a little throwback that I noticed while combing through the footage. They all have a letterbox, presumably with which to receive your fortune. But this one is situated rather close to a familiar looking parcel, one which experienced players will recognise mirrors the one which Mono delivered into a letterbox in the Pale City in order to attain the achievement Post-Industrial. Now, there may be some use or further connotations to the inclusion of this item, but as it stands, it just looks like a noteworthy throwback. As we all know, it wouldn't be the first time the developers have included something like that. Now, at the risk of rambling on for too long, there is one last little scene that I think may have some significance that we can link back to existing lore, and I'll tell you about that shortly. But I do intend to explore every facet of the showcase with you live, where we will go through every frame with a fine-tooth comb to see what other secrets we can uncover. So I hope you'll join us as we explore angles not yet considered and try to uncover stories as yet untold in the run-up to October 10th. But for now, let us just take a look at this distorted wall in the background. Something interesting about Little Nightmares games is the ability of the developers to build stories into the environments, which more casual players would take for granted. Intricate details in the wallpapers, repeating themes in seemingly disconnected areas, and familiar faces appearing in unfamiliar places. So, while it could be argued that this background is intentionally distorted in order to have us focused on our new friends as they navigate a precarious obstacle, it's also just as likely that the background of this shot hides several dark secrets, like the true appearance of this lumbering shroud, or potentially some recognisable mugshots decorating the walls of his quarters. What would a clearer look at these images uncover? Might we find that these are paintings or photographs of his beloved performers? Might this be some kind of twisted trophy wall of some description, or could it simply be images conjured up by the nowhere, pulled from the sleeping subconscious minds of its many, many visitors? A lot of questions to ask, a lot of which will be answered in due course. But for now, let's hold some speculations in reserve and share them together in July's upcoming live stream. Personally, I can't wait to hear what your all-seeing eyes have managed to uncover. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so that you don't miss our collective theory crafting sessions. They're a lot of fun and I think you'll enjoy them, and if you've never attended one before, jump in. We're a really friendly community. I promise. You're all welcome. But until then, little ones, that's game over. Bye.